Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Contour Community Meeting, as you can see here on my screen. Today is August 4th, 2020. We've got some news for you. We're going to talk about what we've been working on and then move into some discussion topics. So let's get to it. I'll share my screen so you all can see.
Yeah, well,
all right.
First up is the news. So yeah, we have had our first CVE. The Envoy deployment had a vulnerability. If you could reach the any of the node networks, then you could cause Envoy to shut down. So theoretically, you could take the entire Envoy deployment offline and stop all Ingress traffic to the cluster, which is bad. So thus we have our first CVE. Luckily, this was a relatively straightforward fix. Steve got the fix in pretty quickly, and just before the 1.7 release, so we didn't even need to issue a patch release. So the timing worked out really well. Yeah, all the details are in the vulnerability thing in there, and we also got to try out the vulnerability process and some of the new stuff that we've had since going to Cncf on a relatively not too ridiculously scary CVE for our first one. So lucky all round.
And this just means that your deployment manifest will look a little different if you're utilizing the shutdown manager. So we moved the hook from an HTTP handler to an exec handler. And that's how we've mitigated the issue. So it's the endpoint which does the shutdown is no longer exposed. Only the kubelet can call the endpoint directly, or the binary. So if you are not following along with our releases and doing your own thing, just note that that's a different change.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. Any questions, comments on the CVE here, or the information within? All right. Moving on to what have we been working on. So this is more what we will be doing this week. So later this week, we'll have another Contour office hours. So Steve Sloka will be leading that. If you have any questions regarding contributing to Contour or setting up Contour or administering Contour or what have you, please join. It's going to be at 1 p.m. Eastern and go on for about 2 hours. So yeah, please join us, and yeah, we'll have some fun. The other thing that is new here is that we have some new distribution lists. You should all have gotten emails, I think last week, from Michael asking you to join the CNCF Contour mailing list. So yeah, please do that, since we're going to retire the Google group there. Any questions, comments?
Just a comment. Might want to, maybe the day before and on the morning before, just drop a note about office hours into the Slack chat. That'd be great.
Yep, that's the plan.
Cool. Thanks, Jonas.
Thanks, James. Steve, while you're here, do you have any updates on the topics for the office hours this week?
So I was just looking up. I think on our schedule, we had blue-green deployments and canary deployments. That was on that list of things that we came up with a few weeks ago. That's out in the, I can stick it in the notes right there. Office hours here. Yoink.
Perfect.
That's what we had set up. We didn't really do the stuff last time we talked about for the last one, which is totally fine. We ended up going down some routes as to how Contour's built and how we get from watching objects in Kubernetes to getting things into the graph that we build and then out to Envoy. We kind of went through some of those topics. So again, we can keep on schedule or go back and do whatever. But that was our initial thought that we were going to talk about. Should no one else have anything else they want to talk about?
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, but again, the goal is to have folks come chat. So Those were just filler items to fill time should we need it. So please come. By no means that has to be the schedule. So come chat about whatever. We can talk about it.
Awesome. Thanks. Any questions, comments? All right. Moving into the discussion items. Who has the first one?
That's me. So I think everyone should have noticed that lots of people are talking about renaming their mainline development branch from master domain. I propose that we do that as soon as GitHub's tooling renders it practicable. GitHub have issued a statement saying, hey, unless you're already doing something like this, you probably should wait until we're going to make this whole process a lot easier. Right now, renaming master domain is 100% possible on any Git repo, obviously. But when you use GitHub, it basically means that all of the open PRs will be closed and a couple of other sort of suboptimal side effects. GitHub have issued a statement that said that they're going to work on making something that will make this easier for you. That should be out in a few months. So I just wanted to register that I think we should do this. I think it's pretty unambiguous we should do it. There's no the only cost that I see is if people are consuming master, which they shouldn't be really. If you're consuming Contour as a dependency, you should be using a version tag. If you're consuming a brand like a Docker image, you should really be using a tagged Docker image, not master. And all the other ways that I can think of, it's kind of, you shouldn't really be doing it anyway. Does anyone else have any thoughts?
My main thought is for the branches, we should do what everyone else in the open source development community is doing. So I think that's consistent with your plan.
What's the timeline that GitHub talked about there? I think that it was like they're going to have initial support for some pieces in September or something, and then full support for a move in like October, November.
Something like that, yes. Sorry, I actually linked their thing in the issue, but not on the backmd. Just says later this year.
Yep, perfect. All right. Thanks.
Yeah, no worries. So I think it probably is worth waiting for that. As much as I would like to have this cleared away and be using more inclusive language today, I think that it's better to wait to be able to do this in a reasonably straightforward way and not break lots of stuff. As much as I dislike having to do that. In the ticket that Steve kindly added to this discussion item, you can see, I did go through and have a look at what would be involved, and it is, possible, but the fact that it closes any outstanding PRs is pretty tricky because we have a lot of PRs in flight at any one time. Well, not a lot, but 8 is enough that it would be tricky to coordinate. If no one has any other objections, then I'm going to sort of mark this down as we talked about it on the community meeting and there were no significant objections, and put that on the issue and leave that open for comment from now on. Like I said, I think that we need to wait for that one. I think there are other inclusive language stuff we can do. Michael mentions there running I'm not sure if it's Veil or Vale tool to, yeah. I can see a case for it being either. So either the English word veil or the Latin word vale. So I think there's probably a case to have that done ASAP and just update this ticket with those details.
So for that part, Steve, late last week I created just a test repo essentially, so we can go through the docs here, so I can show you how that works. If you want, we can do that tomorrow. I didn't get a lot of hits, so it wouldn't be a lot to change here.
Yeah, that's fine. Let me know. We can work on that.
Cool. Thanks.
So, whose has moved to 2 reviewers?
Yeah, so I added this. So it was more of a, I was chatting with Steve Chris, who's one of our new maintainers in the project, and he worked on Valero previously. And one of the things that Valero uses is they have 2 reviewers on every PR to get more eyes and stuff on certain changes. So it was just an idea and a thought of, should we have more than one person reviewing, just to eliminate issues of, folks reviewing and asking for changes and someone else approves it and it gets merged without fixing those other things, or not, as we work US, Australia distributed, that sort of thing,
Yeah, I mean, I think right now there is a risk that, like, there's 2 things here. One, there is a risk that we are not, like, that we, because we've got 2 people in each time zone, it's easy for people in the other time zone to miss things because one of us didn't review it. And so that is a good advantage of having 2 reviewers per PR. Also, it's probably better. Now that we've got 4 maintainers, then 2 reviewers is kind of effectively quorum. So that's good. I mean, the downside is that it'll take longer. It means that the fact that it crosses a time zone means that every PR will take at least sort of 24 hours to merge, probably. So, that's the downside. I think it's probably worth the trade-off, but this is not just a me decision. James, Steve, what are your thoughts? And everyone else, of course, but maintainers first. That's all.
Yeah, I see both sides of it. I mean, I think there are some nice benefits to it, to having that extra set of eyes on things. It came up recently just because there were some things that we got merged and someone else came back later and was like, oh, what about this? We forgot this, or did this thing wrong, and that's obviously going to happen just because we're human and mistakes happen. But it was just, thoughts. And I guess Steve Chris isn't here to throw his sense in either. So maybe James, you can give your thoughts, and then we can maybe push it to next week or the week after when everyone's here again to discuss fully.
Yeah, I have a couple of cents. So normally when I see someone's picked up a review, I'll back off reviewing because as a contributor, it can be frustrating having 2 reviewers tell you either the same thing or 2 reviewers tell you completely different things. So having multiple reviewers at the same time is not a great experience. I think from the team overall point of view, I think having 2 reviewers, I think that would be a win. I think that's a good idea. I guess what I would like to think about though is having a bit more structure around like which 2 reviewers. So since I've been on the team, like the general practice seems to have been just to tag everybody as a reviewer, and you kind of just hope that someone will pick it up. Maybe we want to kind of experiment with a bit more convention around that and say, okay, well, if we have a 2 reviewer policy, then maybe we just explicitly tag the 2 reviewers, or we have some way to flag. We have some kind of convention that we use to flag to say, like, I needed some reviewers on this. So I just want to get some. I just think we should. So in general, yeah, 2 reviewers. I think that's a solid improvement. I'm on board. I just want to figure out how to get the 2 reviewers and which 2.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I don't know if a bot or anything would help randomly sign, or I don't know. It's hard to. There's only 4 right now. There's only 4 of us, to date. So
yeah, I mean,
one person. I mean, one from each time zone.
Yeah.
I think that's good because I think that kind of that's like a forcing function that forces us to communicate with each other, which is good. It's good to have those kind of binding ties.
Yeah, I agree. People who haven't talked already on this one, any thoughts?
So one thing that actually came up in the community meeting today for Valero is that the team right now, because they have this set up, and of course you can always override it, right, if need be. But right now they have some team members are on PTO, so that means that if one of the maintainers puts in a PR and gets reviewed by another maintainer, they don't have another maintainer, a third maintainer, to actually review it.
Right.
So just something to think about. I know we don't usually have PTO during the same time, or we're offline during the same time, but it can be worthwhile to have some language in there saying, hey, when need be, we can override this if a CVE comes out, or if something really crucial comes in and we need to take care of that, absolutely we can override it. But per like a standard, to have 2 reviewers just to make sure it's reviewed by more than just one, I think it's fine.
Get more maintainers.
That's
Well, I mean,
one way of doing
that
it.
is also another thing that we absolutely have to do anyway. So yes, so it is a good forcing function to help us do that too. I mean, maintainers do get special cow powers, right, to push the bypass all the checks button, but we all try not to use that without a very good reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, so I guess I'll call that one agreed for now.
So the next step on there is to update the contributing documentation, right?
Yeah. So I think so we need to yes, we need an in action to update the contributing .go with those details. Hang on. So let's just be clear though. Do we want to wait and talk to Steve K about his thoughts on this before we say yes, we're definitely going to do it, or are we going to go ahead and do it since he suggested it and we all agree with him?
I think we should confirm with Steve K.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and not so much that he suggested it, was more of us talking and passing about his last project. So.
Okay. Sure. No
Yeah.
problem. Okay, that's
Yeah,
fine. So
I think. Yeah.
Okay, so let's put this one. Let's put that one back on the agenda again for next office hours. So next community meeting, and we'll and then we can have someone pick up the act.
Okay, so one last thing about if we do this policy, is this going to be for all project contour repos or just contour?
That is a good point. Since integration tester and IR to proxy currently pretty much have a single maintainer each, really, although everyone has permissions. James is the only one who really does any work on integration tester, and I'm the only one who does any work on IR to proxy. So, yes, that is a very good question that I don't have an answer to right now.
Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion.
Yeah, I just think for ancillary projects that are supporting, I think it's fine to with Go from this.
Yep, I think so too. But let's have a solid think about it, and when we talk about it again. Cool. Okay. So endpoints license board. Thank you for working on a branch for this, Xian. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So as I commented there, just so that we would have typed record of it, I think that we've got there's some, with the Go control plane work and also the external auth work, it looks like they're all sort of getting a little bit tangled up on some of the ways that we deal with EDS and CDS and the endpoints translator and some other stuff. So I think it's probably, although you've done a great job of getting it ready with what we've got right now, I suspect it may actually need a substantial rewrite in the very near future, because we're probably gonna poke at some of those internals for regular endpoints in one way or another. So I think we might need you to hold off on much more on that for now, which is a sucky answer, and I'm sorry. The other thing, the thing that I would like to see though, is that when we are ready to do endpoint slice, that we do it via dynamic type detection rather than like specific feature flags for Contour. Andrew, you are here, so I can ask you. What I remember about endpoint slice is when it's available, the details from one are copied into the other pretty much. Am I right?
Yeah, so today if you, if you were to pull in a 118 or 119 cluster, the endpoint slice objects, there's a matching endpoint slice object for endpoints already. So it's up to the implementer to read one or the other.
Right, okay. So and endpoint slice is currently beta in 118 and 119, is that right?
Yeah, it's beta right now. I think I heard Rob say that they're pushing for GA in 119, but I need to double check that.
Right, okay. So, I mean, realistically, we don't need to worry too much about this object only being beta. It's not going to change very much more before it's GA. Is that?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, right. So what that tells me then is that we could pretty easily use a similar sort of type detection logic to what we've done with ExtensionService and other CRDs, where if we detect that it's enabled in the cluster, that it's present in the cluster, we just use it and we stop using the old endpoint one. I mean, that does mean that there's a version boundary break, where we might be running code that has not been tested as much, but we need to cover that, I think, with tests. And I think that I really like us to move towards that being the pattern for supporting new kinds, that basically, if the kind is available, we use it, or we inform on it. Maybe we have a feature flag that we use it or not, but we should always, if it's present, we should always be running the informer for it and soaking in the data, but then maybe the actual informers for it don't do anything. So that pattern is then useful for endpoint slice, for the service API, any other CRDs that Project Contour wants to add, and all those sort of things. And then we don't have to have a bunch of feature flags. We'll just, enable whether this kind is available or not. And it also lets old types sort of fall away as they fall out of support pretty naturally. So example there is like extensions v1, v1 ingress would have been, if we had this earlier, we wouldn't have had to fuss around so much with that, because you use the storage version and whatever the API server gives you is what you get. It's sort of that's the ideal that I would like to aim for. Thoughts on that, anyone? Steve, you?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, that was the reason I wanted to get these bits kind of discussed first, just so we had some guidance as to, before we hit to the PR stage of having all these things set up quickly. So it wasn't like, here's a bunch of work and then we go, hey, change all these things, So that was the idea of just getting those bits worked out. In terms of integration, I don't know when. I know some folks will disable beta features in their clusters until they hit GA. But I think, Nick, given the idea of using the detection, that should still work if someone's disabled it, because it just won't be there. So I think that still holds true. So that's a great way to do it.
Yeah, I also agree that it probably doesn't hurt to watch endpoint slice, but I definitely think there should be a gate for switching the actual endpoint slice which resource you read. I think there needs to be a gate for that, because if you just watch endpoint slice first, and there's going to be big changes in 118 and 119 on that.
Right. Okay.
I agree.
So it's probably better for this particular one. It's probably better to use the kind detection to detect whether or not we add an informer for it, but then have a feature gate in Contour that detects whether or not we use endpoint or endpoint slice for actually generating the endpoints. And that is an endpoint and endpoint slice specific thing, not a general thing. So the general thing should be, we don't add flags to add kinds, but we may add flags to flip behaviors based on kinds. That's probably the way I would say.
I think so.
Does that seem reasonable to everyone?
Yeah, at least for endpoints, the way I see that working is that endpoint and endpoint slice are two equivalent data sources, and
Yep.
you use one or the other, but they both feed into the same subsystem.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah,
So,
and
sorry, you
yeah, in future releases, they actually may diverge a bit in terms of functionality. So
go. Okay.
there's a PR open right now that actually includes endpoints. So endpoint slice is going to start including the set of terminating pods. Right now, like if a pod is terminating, the endpoints doesn't include that at all, but endpoint slice is going to start including a terminating condition in that. So things like that, something to watch out for.
That's actually might also be useful for us in terms of being able to do separate stuff with endpoints that are terminating. So if we want Envoy to do different things, to drain connections to specific endpoints or something like that, I can't remember the exact mechanisms that are in EDS and CDS and stuff like that in Envoy's API, but having that extra bit of data available of these endpoints should not be accepting traffic anymore is, they might still be healthy, but we should actually start draining them. That would be useful to be able to tell Envoy that at some point. So that would be another good reason for us to move to endpoint slice as soon as we can, to be able to do that. So hope that's another way that we could address some of the problems that, say, the Knative folks have seen about, about 503s and stuff like that, where the endpoints and, they might be healthy in one way, but they're not healthy enough to actually serve the traffic, or vice versa. So, and there's a lot of stuff we've got to do there about mitigating churn, and there's a as Dave always used to say, there's a bit of a slider between how fast you respond to endpoints going and the risk of the endpoint not being valid because you haven't finished checking that it's valid yet. And we've tended to slide towards the responding as fast as possible in the past. But the indications are that some people are running big enough deployments now that that's a problem. So anyway, that is a thing that I and the other maintainers would like to have a bit of a chat about to sort of talk about some directional stuff there, and come back to the community in the community meeting about that next week. So, and I think that probably slides actually into some of the stuff that we're talking about with the extension service for Auth support, doesn't it, James?
Yeah. What?
So I think we.
Sorry.
So basically, I think we're just. I think this is just this is a bit of a heads up that the way that we're thinking about doing external auth is by adding a new CRD, which is extension service, to allow you to configure an extra Envoy service in an extensible way that's useful not only for external auth, but for other things like logging, rate limiting, and so on. This is a thing that we're going to need for a lot of different Envoy features. And so we need to build out a way to do it in a reusable and sustainable way that means that you don't need to learn 7 different ways to specify the thing you need to connect to for some third party, for some extra third service between Contour and Envoy and something else. Does that summarize it, James? Yeah,
pretty much. So I think Steve was trying to explain something to me and I was being a bit dense, but I just realized that the issue 119 that he references covers some of the issues that I've run into here. So this is something where the way we deal with endpoints needs to be a lot more sophisticated. Currently Contour has, a kind of a hard-coded notion that a set of endpoints is a cluster. But to implement extension service, we really need to be able to say that a set of endpoints can be the union of multiple Kubernetes services.
So a set of endpoint. This is a set of endpoints in the Envoy sense, not a set of Kubernetes endpoints. Correct?
Yes. So Envoy has a thing called a cluster load assignment. A cluster load assignment, and that contains the members of a service cluster. So currently Envoy builds those one-to-one with Kubernetes services. So we need to make Envoy's notion of that more sophisticated, because the Envoy APIs, the Envoy APIs want to deal with things in a way. The Envoy APIs for extensions want to deal with things as one cluster, whereas the Envoy APIs for HTTP are fine with dealing with multiple clusters. So
Yeah.
basically running into a whole bunch of modeling mismatches.
Yeah. So I guess to preempt one of the things that I wanted to talk about in the next community meeting, I feel like we've started working on adding some much bigger features into Contour than we've done in the past. We've also been working on adding a lot more configurability. And I think that what we're finding as we do that is we're starting to run up against limitations of the way that we've originally built Contour. Contour was originally built to be very slim. And so it made a lot of, opinionated choices that flowed all the way down very deep into the way the code was designed. And so now as we're trying to do things extended a bit more, we're sort of running up against some of the limitations of that. And so that's why I'd like to have, we're going to have some sort of maintainer level chats to just, make sure that we're all in the same space about where we think about this stuff, and then come back to the community with some of the things that we're going to change to hopefully free up some of this stuff and to make it easier for people who haven't been working on this for a year and a bit to actually contribute to some of these things. Right now, there's a bit of a mess in the sense that, any organically grown project has a bit of a mess. And so where things have been added onto other things, and this is the time when we may have to slow down for a minute and address some tech debt and remove some cruft to be able to go faster later. And I think the work around the Go control plane has really sort of thrown up a lot of that stuff, that there are places where we just have impedance mismatches between the way that Go control plane wants to do things and the way Contour does things, some of which are for good reasons and some of which are just historical. And so we've got a bit of work to do to identify some of that stuff and do that. And I think we need to do this in a higher bandwidth way than GitHub tickets at the moment. So we're going to do a little bit of chatting first, and then hopefully we might be able to talk more in like an office hours or something like that about where we're at on that, next week or the week after. So that was in the so that was one of the things that I wanted to mark down for next week. So great, thanks for adding that, whoever added that into the agenda. Appreciate it.
I was going to editorialize a little bit about, I guess, Contour history. I think it occurred to me the other day that configurability versus there's this slider between configurability being configurable and being opinionated, right? And I think the slider changes as you go up and down the stack. So if you're further down, if you're down low in the stack, you need to be configurable. You can't afford to be opinionated. And as you go up to higher and higher levels of abstraction, you're more and more opinionated, right? So as you go up to like my business's custom platform as a service, which is uniquely, bespokely tailored to my business, you're like really opinionated. But you need to build that thing on things that are configurable. So I think Ingress over time is changing its position in the stack, right? So Ingress 3 years ago probably would have felt like it was really high up in the stack. It's like an opinionated thing. Today, people are assuming Ingress, and people are saying, well, Ingress isn't what I want to use. I want to use something that consumes Ingress. So Ingress is like kind of getting pushed down in the stack. And that change in your location in people's development stacks kind of changes everyone's expectations of your project, right? So whereas before you were opinionated and everyone was like, that's a really good opinion. We really like that opinion. Now they're like, well, I need you to be configurable because now instead of the top of my stack, you're like 3 levels down and I need like 16 different knobs from you. And so I wonder how much that change in that kind of movement in the ecosystem has changed the way people think about projects like Contour.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think that when Contour was first built, a lot of the Ingress usage was, please expose my service, and that was it. So people just wanted it to work and didn't need a lot of things. But as people have started actually doing this more for real, all of a sudden it turns out that like the proxy is a great place to do lots of fix up stuff that you can't do in services that you can't control. And if you've got some busted service that's 3 years old that everyone who's responsible has left the company, but you need to keep it running while you build something new, then guess what? Sometimes someone's got to fix it, and if the service can't fix it, that heads straight to the infrastructure team who controls the proxy, and the infrastructure team who controls the proxy are one of our key users. They're the cluster administrator, and so we need to make sure that we're serving them as well as we're serving the application developer who actually owns the app that it needs to be exposed via an ingress of some sort, whether that's an ingress document or whatever document you're actually using to do it. So I think that that is a really useful way to think about it, James. I do think we've also run quite a bit over time though, and so we probably should consider finishing up, unless anyone else has anything urgent that they would like to talk about.
We just posted a link in the chat window to issue 2287.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't necessarily have to talk about it now, but
yes,
I would like to discuss this since service APIs, we're going to cut a release here soon. I'd like to start kind of breaking down what work needs to be done so that myself and others can start getting involved.
Yep, cool. I think Xian, you've done some work with doing a test implementation of the service APIs with Nginx, am I correct?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. So Xian is currently for like a week, right, or something, still interning at VMware. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, my internship will end this Friday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. But
of course,
sorry, you talk.
Yes, of course, I still have 1 month for my summer break before I start the fall semester. So please feel free to contact me, and I will be very happy to stay in the community.
Excellent. So given that you've already done some work doing that, I would love for Contour to really get ahead of the game here and get the actual behavior implemented. I haven't been able to be as involved as I would have liked in doing that. But yeah, thanks, Daniel. We should definitely add that to the next meeting agenda.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, well, I think we are way over time. Thanks for that, Daniel, and we will talk about that one next week. Thanks everybody for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.